Not too long ago, in the month of March, TotalBiscuit, whom many of you might know or should know, did a podcast, a joint podcast with several professional Twitchers, if you will. And for those of you who don't know, Twitch is a format where one streams gameplay and, in some cases, imagery of oneself in order to make money and be popular and achieve status. And much of the discussion centered around so-called female streamers who tend to show a lot of boobage, cleavage, etc., and use their looks to get ahead. But I'm not particularly interested in that subject. What I am interested in is a series of comments that TotalBiscuit made that demonstrated to me that he is a bit confused with respect to something relatively important, at least to him. Now, I actually appreciate TotalBiscuit's work for the most part, and sometimes I'll watch some of his reviews and opinion pieces on games, and every now and then I might even base my own decision on what he's told me. So he's a good businessman for the gaming consumer. But it seems in matters of science and human behavior that he suffers from an unfortunate but woeful ignorance. Now, he's also gone on record talking about things about esports and whether or not they should be called esports or not, but he emphasizes this word competition. Now, we're going to first listen to what he has to say about this. Now, this is not taken out of context. It's just that this was in, I'll be posting a link to this podcast. This podcast was just massively long, almost 2.5 hours or even more, I think. And there were only a few set points in time where this specific topic was addressed. But TotalBiscuit does show genuine confusion as to what is going on with this. Now, we'll listen to what he has to say, and then we will make a commentary on this. Now, this is important because this is reflective of a larger issue that we face in our society, the idea that the status quo is somehow problematic. That is to say, the status quo of how men and women both engage in activities in a very different fashion and manner and approach, that this is problematic and it somehow needs to be rectified. And of course, gaming is something that is in these days, and so lo and behold, this needs to be rectified as well. But let's listen to what he has to say first. Here we go.
There's this huge problem in that for some reason there are a tiny number of high-level female gamers in literally any game, to the point where I have difficulty naming more than about 3. And I look at and I watch a lot of Hearthstone, I watch a lot of Counter-Strike, Dota, and StarCraft, and there's not that many female anybody. It's not just streamers. Like, the issue of girls not getting to a competitive level is way deeper than Twitch streaming. Like, it's way beyond that. It was the same problem before Twitch even existed. We had exactly the same problem. We know with Brood War in Korea, biggest esport of all time. We still had that same problem. There was literally one female pro gamer, and she lost to Idra and cried. Like, this is... There is still a huge problem. Why exactly it is that for some reason we don't have high-level female players, that is a really complex topic that I think is massively oversimplified, and frankly, it's misdirected when you make claims that, well, because a lot of female streamers are kind of showing boob, that they're either putting off other female streamers or anything like that. I actually will argue the opposite. I'll argue this. It shows that some female streamers can be successful on Twitch without being super competitive. And the super competitive barrier is there and is blocking out almost every female on the planet for every video game. For some reason. And we don't know why that is. I'm baffled by it. I don't know the science behind it. There's got to be science behind it. Is it a social issue? Is it the idea that women are encouraged not to be competitive in that way? Is it a biological issue?
You got money.
And I think that it's just oversimplification to say that, okay, so that, these girls are basically getting ahead by being pretty. Well, they get ahead by being pretty in other walks of life as well. And that's just kind of the way that the world works. And I don't think that's inherently harmful. I think it's a shame. I'd like to see a lot of female gamers be on the same level as male pro gamers. That would be great. but for some reason they aren't, and I don't think it's because some people show boob on Twitch.
Now, Lord Biscuit seems genuinely confused as to why there's this almost absolute dearth of professional or competitive female gamers. This is someone who's clearly very familiar with the competitive gaming scene. He follows everything, and I believe he has personal monetary investments in this sort of activity. And so he knows. He knows who plays, who doesn't play. And he cites the fact that he can name 3, maybe, off the top of his head, professional girl gamers. And in addition to that, he cites the few that even make it to the top tend to be worse than the worst of the male gamers. Now, this is seen, at least in the presentation he's given us, as problematic. He also seems to believe it's somewhat mysterious, although he is willing to concede the idea that there must be science on it. And indeed, there is science on this. He claims that nobody knows why, but people in fact do know why, and we've known why for quite some time. We've known why this is the case in other areas, in professional areas, certain kinds of jobs and activities. And it's nowhere different once you understand how things work with respects to games. Now, I don't have any real hope that Lord Biscuit will be watching this video, and I'm not going to be addressing it to him. But on the off chance that he does, I hope that he can learn from this, because I want to cite the reasons for why I think it is important that TotalBiscuit understands this later on, once I'm done with my description here. Well, for one thing, as many of us know, men and women have different brains, and I'll be posting a link to this. There's been a lot of research on this, and to date, over 100 different differences between the male and female brain have been discovered. What does this tell us? This tells us that being neurologically differentiated from each other, this is going to lead to very different behaviors and, of course, very different interests in different kinds of activities. Now, the problem I think that TotalBiscuit has here is the idea of he's sort of gotten lost in the idea of abstraction. What do I mean by that? Well, for certain things, it's pretty obvious why men and women don't compete in the same arena. Male sprinters, professional sprinters, do not compete against female professional sprinters for the simple fact that male sprinters would blow female sprinters out of the water. Men are physically superior in this regard. And then when it comes to mental activities, when it comes to the abstract, we somehow abstract away from that, if you will, the idea that, well, maybe this can't be the same thing. Competitive sports are one thing, but professional gaming, this is the activity of the mentalist. This is something that's mental, and hence it has to be the same, right? We both have brains. This is, of course, mythology. Activities, be they physical or mental, are going to be ruled by the hormones in a person's body as well as the neurology of that person. And just because something is not physical does not mean that that activity is going to be open and equally to all people attempting to engage in it, and in particular to all people who want to succeed at that activity. Well, it's just some very basics, something that we probably all know by now, but men and women have different kinds of brains. Men tend to have far more gray matter and women white matter. White matter tends to be more connective. Gray matter tends to be much better at facilitating singular activity, tunnel vision. What does it require to be a competitive whatever, a competitive gamer, a competitive chess player, etc.? You kind of need tunnel vision. You need the ability to focus on a singular task and follow through with it till the end. If men, generally speaking, have more gray matter in their brains, this is going to allow them to accomplish this at a much better rate and be more successful at that activity than a, generally speaking, woman who is endowed with more white matter than gray matter. Now, there are other issues related to this that are undoubtedly related to neurology. We have to think about how the sexes approach reproduction. Now, this sounds absurd at first glance or upon first hearing this, for those of you unfamiliar with my videos, because you might think, well, what does reproduction have to do with competitive gaming? It can't have anything to do with that. Well, quite the opposite. We have to understand that most of our behavior, our individual behaviors as members of a specific sex, can ultimately be tied to and go back to, hark to, the way we evolved as individual sexes in the arena of reproductive competition. What was beneficial 500,000 years ago to our hominid ancestors, that is how we evolved. Women develop certain benefits. That is to say, women tend to be more verbally skilled than men are, and verbally better at, say, manipulation. This might have served a certain purpose in terms of forming alliances with other women, getting men to do what they want for them, etc. And that had an evolutionary reason for that. And men tend to be very competitive because they had to be, frankly speaking. We have to think about what interests men in women. Men, let's be honest, tend to be almost singularly concerned with the appearance of women, signs of fertility, youthful appearance, etc. Everything else tends to be secondary. Yes, it is quote-unquote cool if a girl is a gamer or enjoys some flick that you might enjoy, but at the end of the day, the primary determining factor in male interest in a female is the appearance of the female. That's why there's a cosmetics industry and plastic surgery and the whole gamut of it all. So, there we have it. Now, if we understand that, we can understand why men in general are going to be interested in and thrive in competition. Women, on the other hand, are interested in acquiring resources, whereas men are singularly interested in genetic fitness. Women are interested in genetic fitness and the acquisition of resources, and they often have to make a compromise on this. But this, of course, has created a Homo sapiens, a male Homo sapiens, that tends to be very competitive, tends to have this gray matter-driven tunnel vision that allows him to perform tasks in a singular fashion in a very driven and determined manner, and he tends to compete against other men doing this. Now, be that a proper, quote-unquote, proper sport or an e-sport such as StarCraft or Dota or League of Legends, I mean, this is what men do. They compete against each other in order to increase their status because they know instinctively that genetic fitness usually isn't enough to attract a female mate. Now, of course, none of this, or very little of this, occurs on a conscious level. This is all autopilot. This is the way people just think and act as just a matter of fact and the way we evolved. But this does, in fact, explain why there's a overwhelming preponderance of male gamers in the competitive gaming scene as opposed to almost none whatsoever of female gamers. Let's be frank. Reproductively speaking, being a successful pro gamer has almost no benefit or value to an attractive young female whatsoever. Why should she invest the time? I've heard stories and seen documentaries of professional gamers who spend 18 hours a day, and sometimes upwards of 20 hours a day, gaming, practicing, training, etc. That isn't just a full-time job. That is a double, a triple full-time job. I remember hearing a story and reading about a professional South Korean gamer who attempted suicide due to the pressures inflicted on him. Professional gaming, and I've actually talked to a few former professional, say, Counter-Strike players, etc. This is not something for the weak-willed. This activity in general, professional competitive gaming, it's not something for someone who isn't willing to give it their all. It's not something for someone who isn't willing to rack his body and his brain on a daily basis in order to achieve the best results. It's incredibly stressful. It's incredibly tiring. And it can perhaps literally drive you crazy in the sense of depression. It can totally ruin you, and there have been cases of this. So someone such as a woman who would gain no benefit whatsoever in terms of reproductive success from this kind of competition, this rigorous type of competition, as well as the total investment of time, hours, and just endless work that takes to get to a professional level, there's no motivation for a female to bother with this. This is not a social issue. This is the way we are wired. Now, some people say that women aren't encouraged and blah, blah, blah. They don't want to do this, just like most women don't want to become aerospace engineers, and most women do not want to become mathematics professors. Yes, there are exceptions. There always will be. But when I say most, or generally speaking, I am referring to a majority. This is why, yeah, you do find the odd female gamer, professional gamer, but they are extremely rare by way of comparison, and also tend to be inferior to the male gamer. Most women, for evolutionary reasons, lack the drive and the desire to achieve at that level. And frankly speaking, most men do too. I don't want to work 18 hours a day and be drop dead tired 7 days a week. It's absolutely ridiculous. And that some men are willing to do that is simply a byproduct of the way we evolved. Most men are very competitive by nature, but this takes it to a different level. It's just a question of how people benefit from certain activities. And women get no benefit whatsoever from working their asses off and running themselves into the ground in something that just doesn't really appeal to the opposite sex. That is, reproductive success for the female is predicated on, well, basically genetics, just looking good. And reproductive success for a male is predicated on two different things: genetic fitness and his ability to bring home the bacon, essentially. And competitive gaming is just another version of bringing home the bacon. The best gamers, as we know it, the professional gamers, the ones who are number one, they have fangirls. Women who probably would fucking suck them at the bat of an eyelash. This is the same case with, professional rockers, the Rolling Stones. This is just the way it works. It's the way the world works. Men and women have different brains. They have different bodies, and this is going to lead to different results. This is not problematic. The status quo, that is, the way the world works as a fact, as it actually is presented to us, as we can comprehend, is not something that can be overturned or changed willy-nilly. And the problem only occurs when we see this as problematic. And TotalBiscuit makes the mistake of presenting this as problematic. He makes the mistake of thinking that, well, since this is a mental activity, we are inclined to think that men and women would be of equal representation here and would be performing at the same level, and this might be an issue of encouragement. He does offer the possibilities. Is it a social issue? Is it a biological issue? We don't know, but we do know. We know very precisely what's going on here. And it's not problematic because it's just the way the world works. Men and women are naturally going to do what they're most inclined to do. And, we can't do very much about that. Even if it were desirable to change this, and I just have a neutral position on this, we're not going to. So, we understand what the cause of this is. But what could be done by very famous personages such as TotalBiscuit, Lord Biscuit, to change the way people perceive this? Well, I'm a nobody, an internet nobody, but TotalBiscuit isn't. If TotalBiscuit took the time to learn the science behind this, and it's not rocket science, and present his findings to the public, this could help foster wider understanding of this to a greater audience. This could help foster a greater comprehension of the reality of the facts behind these things, rather than seeing things that aren't problematic as problematic. I mean, why should it be problematic that there are so few professional girl gamers? There aren't even that many girl gamers to begin with. TotalBiscuit has also gone on record for stating factually that this idea that 52% of gamers are girls, and much of this is just taken from really simple mobile apps. We're not talking about quote unquote real games where you have to sit at a laptop or a desktop and spend hours on end playing. That still is a minority of girls, and in all likelihood, that's not going to change either. A man of the renown of one TotalBiscuit could help spread a message based on facts and knowledge far beyond what I could do if he just took the time to understand these things and really present to his audience his findings and say, hey, maybe it's not problematic. Now, later on in this incredibly long podcast, and I couldn't even find the clip again because it's so long, TotalBiscuit suggests that, well, maybe we could create separate girl competition in the same sense that we have, separate tennis competition, separate sprinting competition, etc. And that's actually not a bad idea. But even so, I don't see a ton of women actually pursuing that avenue, just like there aren't a ton of professional women athletes. That's unlikely to occur. And for the simple reason that women aren't wired that way, and men are wired that way. This isn't problematic. It's just the way the world is. And of course, this topic has repercussions for, well, the rest of the world and the rest of the jobs in the world. And I mean, this is the same debate that's been raging for decades, getting more women into maths and sciences and blah, 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 blah. Well, in the West, where women have absolute freedom to do whatever they want, they're still not going into it. And it's because, why? Supposedly they're not being encouraged? No, they're just not naturally inclined to do these things. And there's no point in taking a cattle prod and forcing anyone, man or woman, to do something that they don't want to do. It's a waste of time and a waste of energy. And frankly speaking factually on these matters would be a lot more beneficial to a lot more people. This is, at the end of the day, what this should be about. And a person of the importance and renown as TotalBiscuit could do a lot better job, ultimately, than I ever could in explaining these things, even though I might possess more knowledge on the subject than him, because, well, frankly speaking, he has an audience of millions, and I have an audience of a few thousand. But I do think this is important to talk about, because this is all these idiotic debates that have been going on for decades about different professions and subjects of study are now appearing in the gaming scene and have been for the last couple of years, and it's viewed as problematic, and it's seen as this unsolvable issue, this mystery. In fact, that is exactly how TotalBiscuit presents it. He does admit that he's ignorant on the subject, but it is not a mystery. We understand why things are the way they are and how they've come to be. And we should just accept it and move on with our lives and try to understand it better as it is, as opposed to delving and diving into wishful thinking for a world that doesn't exist. It is a waste of time, and I think TotalBiscuit and all the well-known professionals in the gaming scene could benefit from understanding these basic facts about human biology and how we evolved. So that's all I have to say about that. With any luck, Lord Biscuit will in fact watch this video and perhaps take something from the video. Otherwise, yeah, I appreciate his contributions to gaming, and every now and then he adds some insight to my world, so I can see whether or not I actually want to get a game. So it's appreciated on my end, and maybe he can benefit from this. Anyway, Stardust out here, and as always, may your chosen deity watch over you. Bye-bye.